Welcome back to the show. Today we're going to be discussing what version of the Bible do the Jewish people study? What is the best version to study? I'm going to find out. Sit tight. We'll be right back. Welcome to Tanakh Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live out of Kingsland, Texas, USA, with Rabbi Tovia Singer from actually in the Holy Land. Thankfully, he looks so happy. Rabbi Tovia Singer, let's get biblical. Q&A. The show is for you. No, we're not selling Budweisers, but this bud is for you. Rabbi, it's glad to have you back in the show again.
Great to be here from Jerusalem.
Indeed, indeed. Very, very cool. Very cool. You remember how many times, I can't tell you how many times I've actually, why are you off-centered now all of a sudden? Hang on, I'll fix that. Don't do a thing. I can fix it on my side. It'll only take me a second. And look at you. Look at all handsome and fancy. There we go. All right, now we got you. Very good, very good. Okay, so today's major topic, I guess you could say, first topic, is really a very, very interesting one based on a conversation. This was not my question. This is somebody else brought this question up, but it reminds me of a conversation I had with an old friend of mine, and I won't mention his name, but he was a minister, right? In fact, that's how we met, was when I was a Christian, like when I was a youngster, 18, 19, 20 years old, I was in their ministry. And he's still a minister today. Well, about 4 or 5, 6 years ago, we were in a conversation for quite some time discussing the Bible, and he was arguing with me points about, about this and that and whatnot about the prophets. And throughout our conversation, we talked for about, I want to say maybe 45 minutes. And throughout the conversation, I kept referring back to the Hebrew. The Hebrew says this, Hebrew says that, whatever. And towards the end of the conversation, and he argued with me like he was fighting cats and dogs. It was horrible. And he was just like, man, that just ridiculing me, how stupid that sounded and all this other stuff. And then right just at the end of our conversation, 45 minutes later, he goes, why do you keep mentioning Hebrew? What is that? I'm thinking, there are a lot of people who don't know that Hebrew is the original language of the Bible. And so so after he said that, I tried to tell him that it was the original language of the Bible, and but he didn't get it. It's like he was, for some reason, he literally was blinded by what I was saying. And he goes, well, you're just trusting the Jews' version of the Bible. I'm like, that's not a version. You don't understand. It's not a version of the Bible. That is the Bible. That is the original, and that's their native tongue. So, with that said, I'm really excited to discuss this as a major topic today because it's something that everybody should realize is that a lot of people that they are talking to, Christians, may not be aware that there is still an original version, or that the Hebrews, maybe they think the Jewish people actually have a version also. So, kind of interested to see how this goes. Take it away.
I debated one of the leading Christian scholars in the English-speaking world a handful of years ago, and this man is really a first-class scholar and a first-class person. He's really a very fine gentleman. And prior to the debate, we had a chance to talk, and I asked him, what questions do you field most frequently from your students? Dr. Craig Evans, he's a very bright man. He's a prince of a person, a really classy guy, and a terrific teacher. And he said one of the questions I'm asked most frequently is, which translation of the Bible does he recommend? Which translation of the Bible does he recommend? I asked him, what do you tell them? He said, well, I recommend the New American Standard if they want something that provides a more literal translation. In NIV reads a little better, but it's not. Its translation is not as sometimes awkward as in the New American Standard. But it's a cleaner read. And I asked him, why don't you just recommend that they just jettison translations and read the original, read the Hebrew, learn the Hebrew? And he looked at me and he just, what could he say? He said, yeah. So as it turns out, when I pose this question to Christians who are serious Christians, they actually, I don't mean to offend anyone, but it's very much like asking a smoker, why do you smoke? You ever do that? Like, why do you smoke? There's plenty of information out there that this is not a very good idea. And you usually get that kind of look like, yeah, that's the kind of answer you get. They know it's not the best thing, and yet they do it. A translation of the Bible with the best intent possible is the word of man. It's a translation is a treason, and translation, particularly from Hebrew to the English language, which means you're not just talking about two families of languages, you're talking about two species of families. The Hebrew language is so different. The Semitic structure is so completely different than the English language and the relatives of the English language that translators are forced to put in all sorts of words that are only implied in the Hebrew. And there are words in the Hebrew that may seem like synonyms, but they are conveying a completely different message. And if you're reading the Bible in a translation, you're kissing God through a towel at the best. People think that a translation is basically like seeing a photograph in black and white rather than color.
Right.
It's not correct at all. You're missing what is being conveyed. You're missing it. And when people ask this question, it's like asking the question, what wheelchair do you recommend? I love this wheelchair. This is the wheel. No, there's another crutch. I love this. These crutches are so good. This is the best. This is a conversation no one would take up. Why? Because people who are injured or whatever, and they have to use crutches, they're not going, which crutch should I use? They're trying to figure out how many days left till I don't need the crutches. Granted, there are many, many people who did not study the Hebrew language, who never taught the Hebrew language as children, and they love the Bible. So what happens? So they discover that they have to read the words that Hashem conveyed themselves, not through a translator, but it's a crutch. Reading a translation should be viewed as something that's completely undesirable. And it should be as, which wheelchair do I use? Do I use this wheelchair? That wheelchair goes like this wheelchair like that. You should only question is how much longer am I stuck with the translation till I can read the Hebrew in the original? And Hebrew is a very easy language. And I'm speaking to the English speakers here who speak a language that's vast. The English language, could be close to 1 million words. The Hebrew language is not even 9,000 words, biblical Hebrew. It's a relatively speaking, a very easy language to learn. So therefore, people have to stop asking the question of which translation do I use? Do you suggest this? And a person should vote herself to reading the Bible in its original language and should view any translation as a crutch, as a wheelchair, something temporary, something that you want to get out of. Now, I'm not even discussing the Christian translations that are almost all cases are corrupt. There are some new translations in the last century where more liberal Christians have made an earnest attempt at jettisoning the corruptions, but the Christian translations are utterly corrupt, and they render the Hebrew scriptures in a way that's Christological in order to sustain and to bolster the tampering with the Jewish scriptures found all over the Gospels and is ubiquitous all over the writings of Paul. Paul altered the Jewish scriptures deliberately in order to make it appear Christological. And the Christian translators support this in their translations, not in all cases, but in most cases. And this is also true with the Greek translations that they call the Septuagint are not the Septuagint. This is a Christian translation. You go, what? It's a Christian translation. It's been redone and redone and redone. And Origen, the 3rd century church father, is essentially its final editor. They call it the Septuagint and should be called that at all. They call it the Targum Shivim. They shouldn't call that at all. It's a Targum Yovon. It's a Greek translation that adopted an ancient term called the Septuagint, and it's completely incorrect, and people shouldn't do that. So people should view translations at best as a crutch that you just use until your leg heals, that you use until you can read and understand the original Hebrew, which not just sheds more light. I think people think that the original Hebrew will shed more light. It doesn't do that. The original Hebrew means that you're encountering God's word face to face without having any people, 47 people, interfering with it in the King James Version. That's the number of translators that rendered the King James from, let's say, 1607 to 1611. So now, one other point should be made, and that is, when it comes to commentaries, then the translations can be valuable to someone who doesn't have training in Hebrew, because the super commentaries were written by the great sages of Klal Yisrael, and they were written by men who were very, very brilliant, who very frequently wrote using just tight language, and you need someone to not just translate it, to render it, but to elucidate it, which some publishers like R Scroll do, and then that becomes very, very valuable. So do not see translation as it is in the Christian world as normative, no more than a wheelchair or crutch is normative. If someone breaks their leg, someone needs a wheelchair, all that person should hope for is the day that they don't need a wheelchair anymore. Nobody heals from whatever ailment they suffer from, a broken leg, and says, you know what, I'm going to keep going around in wheelchairs. Why? Because I want to get on the plane first. A person says, I'm happy to get on the plane and go tomorrow and not need a wheelchair. And a person is happy to get out of the wheelchair, get out of because it's not just color. It is the word of man. It's not the word of God. That's by definition a translation is a human endeavor. And you don't want that. You don't want anything between you and God. You want that intimacy to reading the text, because if you don't read the original, you don't realize what is unfolding, what is taking place. And only the original Hebrew, conveys that beautiful message of Tanakh. So thank you for that question.
Okay, very cool. All right, we're going to take this next caller. Caller, welcome to the show. Please tell us your name and where you're calling from.
The original Hebrew conveys...
Caller, you have to take turn your computer down if you don't mind.
Okay, very good.
He's waiting for us to talk.
Caller, welcome to the show. Please tell us your name and where you're calling from. Hello? Hello?
Yeah, you're live on the air. About a 20-second lag in what you see versus what's actually happening. Are you still there? He must not have been able to hear us. He's got a phone line mixed up. So, okay. So the phone lines are definitely open. So, hey, whenever you were talking, by the way, that's actually where you and I first met, I believe, was at the Craig Evans debate. Dr. Craig Evans, that was very, very interesting, filled weekend for sure. So, all right, here we go. Let's try to take this call. Caller, welcome to the show. You are live on the air. Please tell us your name and where you're calling from. Hello. Hold on. What's up here? Can you hear us now? I got a setting change here. 1 second. It's not going to do any good if they can't hear us. Caller, can you hear us? Hello. Caller, can you hear me now? Well, I don't know what's going on. For some reason, it's not going through. Let me see here.
Hello?
Yes, you're live on the air. Can you hear us?
Hey.
Can you
hear me?
You can hear me okay? Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me talking to you? Guess not. Okay, so, well, let's do this. Rabbi, let's go
I
ahead.
think there's something wrong with the connection. Hello?
Yeah, I think there is too. So let's do this right fast.
Hello?
You know what? Take a moment, William, to correct it.
Okay, gotcha. I was going to pass on another question to you. But let me just see if I can check this real fast. There's some auxiliary settings I've got to deal with here. Put this back on the original settings real fast. I think that'll probably do it right there. And we'll try it again. So we'll see if another caller would like to call in. My aux is up. Playback to aux is up. And aux mix level is up. Okay, cool. Well, we should be good to go now. All right, we'll find out. So, okay, well, let me go ahead and if the phone rings in the middle of what I'm fixing to tell you, then we'll take the call and see if that actually fixed it. If not, we're going to go ahead and move on with this next question. Let me pull it back up here. Where'd my Facebook messaging go? And here we go. Let's try this first and see if this will work. Hello, caller. You are live on the air. Please tell us your name. Where you're calling from. No, there's definitely something wrong with the phone system. So I'm gonna leave them connected here. And Rabbi, I'm gonna pass this question along to you real fast. There was one. Let me see if I can find. You sent me a question earlier. I'm gonna try to see if I can track.
I don't know if you hear me, but I cannot hear you.
Okay, gotcha. Well, me talking to him isn't going to do any good then, is it? That's fine.
Enough already.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. Maybe
Okay.
he could just ask his question.
Okay, if we could get him the message on YouTube, maybe that would be good. In fact, that's actually a good option. Let me put a message on YouTube real fast. That the phone lines are one way. So I'm just going to type in here when you call in. Actually, everybody who's listening on the show, when you call in, once we've connected and you hear me, you don't hear me at all. That's the problem. See, they don't know when to ask their question. That's the issue. So I'm definitely going to have to fix it. So let me turn this down.
Let's see what happens.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, so I'm going to turn the call down, and I'm going to pass along this question for you. I was not really ready for that one, but I will be now. Okay, here we go. This is actually a really good question. So in 2 Samuel, we read in chapter 7, verse 16, "And thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before thee. Thy throne shall be established forever. Why is there no throne in Jerusalem in the present day, and with the descendant from King David as a ruler over David's kingdom, as Hashem promised?"
That's a very good question. It means we find numerous times in Tanakh that Hashem made a promise to the tribe of Judah through the prophet, to the patriarch Jacob, for example, in Genesis chapter 49, verse 10. I'm paraphrasing what is being conveyed in this very elaborate, the most elaborate blessing that Jacob gives to his sons from his deathbed, that the scepter will never depart from Judah, ad ki yavo Shiloh. It may be complex what that term means, but let's just take that in the most conventional sense. It means until Mashiach comes. Okay? The ruler must come, legitimate ruler must ultimately come from the Davidic house, and this question is in 2 Samuel chapter 7, after King David's request to build the temple rather than God dwelling in a tent was turned down by the Almighty. Nathan, in fact, the chapter begins with David asking that he can build a temple. Nathan, it's one of the odd places in Tanakh where the prophet, to his own mind, seemed like that would be a very good idea. One of the odd places where a prophet is not receiving prophecy, but responds according to his own wisdom and understanding. It's an odd text. And Nathan's thought was, it sounds like a great idea. Now, David would have built the Beis HaMikdash immediately. David's reign began in Hebron, and then David settled Yerushalayim as the capital of the Bnei Yisrael, and he sought to build the Beis HaMikdash there. To Nathan, this made an enormous amount of sense, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu, after Nathan, I'm paraphrasing, thought this would be a good idea, HaKadosh Baruch Hu came to Nathan and said, David cannot be the one who would build the Beis HaMikdash. As it turns out, David engaged in wars, and those hands that engaged in wars that God had sanctioned, but still those hands cannot build the Beis HaMikdash. It would be reserved for Shlomo HaMelech. Very interesting, and Nathan conveys that actually, so Nathan's operating under his own wisdom and understanding, thought it was a good idea. Because Baruch Hu says to Nathan, it's not a good idea at all, and David is instructed immediately to not engage in that practice. Although David was given the mandate to prepare the materials for the temple. He wrote the Psalms that would be recited by the Levites. He almost did everything but build the temple. Shlomo HaMelech, whose reign spanned 40 years, and in that 40-year reign, he engaged in no wars. There was absolute peace in his time. He was the perfect person for this. In this chapter, so now we have a context, there is a promise made to David HaMelech, and that is that the covenant would always be before you, and the reign, the malchus would always come out of you, and it would never depart from you. And this would be very important because, as it turns out, David's predecessor lost. It was taken away from Shaul because Shaul did not follow the instructions of the prophet of God properly, and it was removed from him and it was given to David HaMelech. What is being conveyed in all these covenants and promises that we find, Tanakh is rich with these messages, is not that there would never be a time in history where there would not be a Davidic king on the throne. A person might think that, but it's not a correct understanding at all. What is being conveyed is whenever there's a legitimate king, it would come from Malchus David, it would come from the house of David. And even, we are told in this chapter, if David had sons who would sin against Hashem, and many did, like Achaz, Menashe, there's a laundry list of these characters. Hashem would punish them personally, but would never remove the Davidic reign from them. Achaz was arguably the worst Davidic king in history. He was a great-grandson of King David. I say many people would suggest that Menashe was the worst. He, after all, reigned a much longer time, and he certainly did more damage during his reign than Achaz did. But Achaz was unrepentant. Menashe did tshuva, repented, and that is conveyed by the prophet Ezra in the book of Chronicles. So we are told that even if somebody sins, I'll punish them personally with the rod of men, but I'll never take it away. But what is not being conveyed is that there will never be a time in history when there would be no king. In fact, we are assured in Tanakh that, in fact, there would be a very long span of time with no Davidic king. See Hosea, chapter 3, verse 4 and 5, where the prophet tells us that the children of Israel will abide for many, many days without a king, without a high priest, without a sacrificial system. And it says for a very long time, for many, many days. And this is our exile today. Afterward, the Bnei Yisrael returned to the Lord their God and David their king. And here it means a Mashiach. It doesn't mean David literally, but it means the great-grandson of David, thus preserving the Davidic covenant. The Mashiach is frequently referred to as David, because you'll ask why that should have been something less confusing, but because in every generation there is a descendant of David HaMelech who is set and ready to step forward, who is a branch from the tree that begins at the root of Jesse. See Isaiah chapter 11, verse 1 and 2, particularly verse 1. So therefore, in every generation, there is someone who is a Anikel, who is a grandson of King David, who's ready to step forward. Because in any generation, the nation of Israel can launch the coming of Mashiach by turning back to God. See Isaiah 59, verse 19 and 20, Uvolet Tzion Goel. The Redeemer will come to the Bnei Israel, to Jacob, to those who repent in Jacob. So therefore, there has to be always someone in every generation ready to step forward. So it's a wide range of people. And the person who's set to step forward, it can't be a baby, it has to be a mature adult. The point is that it is explicitly conveyed to us in the Jewish scriptures that there would be a very long exile before the coming of Mashiach. There was a much shorter exile between the two temples of 70 years, also prophesied in in Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 10, also prophesied discussed in Chronicles, where it's just explaining why it was a 70-year exile. So that's a very short period of time from the time Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the first temple to the time the Jews returned to Eretz Yisrael under the leadership of Zerubbabel and Yoshua ben Yotzadok to build the second temple. So what is being conveyed is that when there would be a king, it would be a Davidic king. It is not conveyed that there would never be a moment in history where that the Bnei Yisrael would be without a king. As it turns out, I just want to run with this one more knach, as they say. Christians often seize this point and insist that the blessing that Jacob bestowed on Judah in Genesis 49 does mean that there would always be a Davidic king over the children of Israel. Their point is the following. The missionary claim is that there will always be a Davidic king, and Christians charge Jews with covering up the truth. Where is your king today? Where is this person, the one who is sitting on the throne of David? There must be somebody, and if you don't have anyone, Judaism must be a defective religion, and we, the Christians, have a Davidic king, and that's Jesus Christ. That's how it goes. So this is all silly because, as it turns out, even Christians concede that in the Second Temple period, there was no Davidic king. There was no Davidic king after Tzidkiyahu, after Zedekiah. So this is all silly, and it's prophesied explicitly in Tanakh that there will be a very long time, not only without a king, but also without the sacrificial system, which Christians can't possibly explain, and literally says until the Achras Yom, until the end of days, until the latter days, until the Messianic age. So this question is excellent, and it bears an enormous, it has an enormous message to Christians who seek to charge the Jewish people with maintaining a religion that's defective, and that's what Christians believe. And the Christians are making a terrible mistake. They're brainwashed with this information. They don't mean badly. This is what they're taught as their children, and Tanakh is conveying a completely different message. Now, there were people who proclaimed they were kings during the Second Temple period, and they were completely illegitimate. Well, for example, tragically, the Maccabean, the family of the Maccabees would claim kingship, and that family was destroyed for this because they were a priestly family, and that was not legitimate. Herod claimed he was king, but he wasn't legitimate. He wasn't even Jewish. He was an Edomite. So there were people who claimed to be kings, but they were not legitimate kings of the Bnei Israel. Excellent question. Thank you for that.
Okay, very good. So I think we've got a plan. If if the caller still can't hear us, what we'll do, they are watching us live. So what we'll do is just keep watching and listening using your computer. And even though there'll be like a 10 to 20 second lag between, at least we'll be able to get you live on the air, and we will be able to hear your questions. So we're going to take this caller and see if it fixed it. And if not, hopefully they have already gotten my message. If they don't, we've got a couple calls on hold. So here we go. Caller, if you can hear us, please tell us your name and where you're calling from. Caller, if you can hear us now, let me know, and we'll get you live on the air. Can you hear us okay? Okay, so I just tried two more things that I could only try while we were live, so neither one of those worked. I'm not really sure.
You can, if you want to, take a moment, William, hang up and reset it up and redial it if you'd like.
Well, let's actually, I'm going to go ahead and hang up with this one and see if the next person got the message. Actually, they already hung up, so. Well, there's really not much more I can try here. I don't want to reset the computer. Let's take this one and see if this works here. Okay, so now that we've got this caller, we're going to wait. Caller, go ahead and ask your question when you're ready.
Hello, I'm Maximo from Adelaide, South Australia.
Can you hear me?
I have a question for the rabbi.
He can hear you.
My question is, is there a version of the Trinity within Judaism in regards to the parts of him? Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Very cool. That worked out well. He still couldn't hear us, but he answered the question like right on cue. It's perfect. Good job. Rabbi, you got that question, I guess. Is there any version?
No.
Very good.
There can be no doctrine, no creed that is opposed more vigorously by the prophets of Israel than the doctrines of the church as it relates to the nature of the Godhead. Nothing could be more vulgar than the doctrine of the Trinity. In fact, this doctrine is a self-inflicted wound from which the church never recovered. Now, it is throughout Tanakh, throughout Jewish literature, we are told that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, is one who is a Rahman, who is merciful. He is a great judge. He's eternal. He's all-powerful. He's Shechinad. See Isaiah 57, verse 15. This does not mean that there's one God who's powerful and one who's merciful. That's crazy. What it is conveying to us that all these facets of God are all the same, are coming from the same source. We may have trouble at times, which is true, understanding how the same God is merciful could be the judge. And the prophets explain this, and our literature explains this further. There is no question that because the doctrine of the Trinity is not only found nowhere in Tanakh, but the prophets warned us about such doctrines, that Christians would seek to go into Jewish literature and find places where the sages of blessed memory explain that all these different powers of God that we see, that to us seem incompatible. How could the God of mercy be the one of justice? So it's all the same. They will misconstrue these teachings to say, the Jews believe in multiple deities, chas v'chalila, heaven forbid, because our sages explain that when you see all these different things, that God is a judge, sometimes we don't understand what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing. Sometimes we see things that happen, and to us at the time, let's say in the 1880s, Jews in the Pale settlement of Russia, Jews in Europe saw the terrible pogroms that occurred. Terrible things happened, and Jews fled. And they fled to Eretz Yisrael, and they fled to the United States. They fled all over. I'm sure at the time they couldn't figure out why would a God of mercy allow such things, Nikolai II, to do these things, and for these pogroms to exist throughout Europe. And doesn't seem at all compatible with the God of love. Now, a person who fears Hashem, we don't always understand, and when we encounter something HaKadosh Baruch Hu does that we don't understand, a person who is loyal to Hashem says, I don't understand, but I am sure that Kol ma da'avid rachman l'ta'avid, that everything that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does, everything the Torah tells us is for the good. I may not understand it now. As it turns out, millions of Jews fled from Europe because of these, what seemed to be a curse, and as it turned out, it saved them, because if they would have remained in Europe, they would all been killed they would all gone to Hitler's ovens. So there are times where we don't understand what is happening, and we are required to have emunah pshuta, which means simple faith. Chazal is telling us that when we see these manifestations, it's really all from God. Looking back, if these things which seemingly were horrible didn't occur, wow, the Jews would have all these Jews would have been wiped out. Millions and millions between 1880 and 1926, a period of 45, not even a half a century, 4 million Jews fled to the United States. In 1880, there was not even 300,000 Jews in America. By 1920, let's say 26, Congress had at that point passed a number of laws essentially barring immigration would make it very, very difficult. Over 4 million Jews came to America, and those Jews would have gone up in Hitler's ovens. So I want to get back to this point. Chazal tell us, it's all over Tanakh, the Torah tells us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has, to our perception, many different qualities. He's a powerful, he's a kel mole, he's full of mercy, love, and kindness, so on. But to us it seems diverse. It isn't at all. The Torah said this is all from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's all from one God. Although to our little heads, to our human brains, we don't always know it, and therefore we depend on Tanakh. The doctrine of the Trinity is not just idolatry, the belief that there are 3 distinct persons within a Godhead. That's what the doctrine of the Trinity is. That there is Christians. If you ask a Christian, how many gods do you believe in? Christians will say, every Christian will say, I believe in one God. But they'll say, hold on for a moment. There may be one God, but there are 3 persons. This word person has no real meaning. It's this fancy word with a capital letter, and it doesn't have a conventional meaning, and people are fooled by it. What does that mean, persons? So the doctrine of the Trinity is not just an idolatry. It's not this person worshiping trees and stones and gold and silver. It's the worst thing in the world, because the doctrine of the Trinity is an association. It's a shutfus, it's a partnership, which means that Christians, unlike the pagans who live in the Congo, they believe in the one true God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but they believe that the Son is also a God who is the same God, but he's distinct in person. That's the worst thing you can do. The worst thing you can do is to believe in the true God and add on to it. Exodus chapter 20. These are the Aseres HaDibros, the 10, not just commandments, but the word Dibros doesn't mean commandments. This is why I never use a translation. It's the 10 statements. I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt from the house of bondage. Lo yihi lecha Elohim acherim al ponai. You shall have no other gods upon my face. What does it mean, upon my face? What face? What do you mean upon? Why don't you say there's lo yihi lecha Elohim acherim, end, period. What do you mean, al ponai, on my face? There's not an extra word in the Torah. Nothing. There's nothing vestigial. If you see a phrase, if you see a modifier, if you see something in the text that seemingly is vestigial, you have to stop everything. That's an earthquake. Look carefully. It means l'rabbi shutfus. It means to tell you that the worst thing you can do is to have a partner with God, another person with the true deity. That's why it's worse, because Christians really believe in the true God. They're married to God, but they're getting text messages from somebody else. they're getting messages on Facebook from some other girl. This is the worst thing you can do. Then you're destroying a marriage. The worst thing you do. So the doctrine of Trinity was not known to the writers of the Christian Bible. It's not in the Christian Bible. It was later Christians in the 2nd century who would introduce this doctrine. The term is coined by Tertullian, a Latin church father of Carthage, very important because Carthage is the part of the African continent, part of the empire, but North Africa was where the gods of Egypt came in triads. And Tertullian spoke to his fellow countrymen in a language they understood. His understanding of the Trinity was not developed, and it would develop further in the 3rd century and 4th century. Origen tried to formulate ideas about the doctrine of the Trinity. His understandings also were deficient by the view of Orthodox Christianity, and Origen is considered problematic, as was Tertullian, even though these were some of the brightest. I mean, these are hideous people, but they were very bright people. And ultimately, it was a surrender to the a deacon in Alexandria, and the Council of Nicaea that would affirm his Christology, that Jesus was of the same substance but a separate person. And this is conveyed in the Nicene Creed. So the doctrine of the Trinity is an odious doctrine. It so damages Christians. It pushes Christians completely away from Hashem and damages the view of HaKadosh Baruch Hu completely. It's not just they add on to have a girlfriend. It's nocherg. It's really very bad, because what it does is if there is any other divine being who has a distinction from the Father, that means the Father is not omniscient and omnipotent, not all-powerful and all-knowing. And that's why in the Christian view, God cannot forgive people without Jesus. He just can't forgive somebody. He can't. It's an idea that is so alien to Tanakh, where the prophets are repeatedly saying, I can forgive you, and Hashem will forgive you. And if you don't believe me, Menashe, who was a horrible king, he repented to God in Babylon, and God forgave him. No matter how bad you think you are, God could forgive you. And you can be sure that Menashe didn't bring any sacrifices when he was chained and fettered in Babylon, when he was carried away. What's the message? Why is Menashe so critical, his repentance so critical? Because he's like the worst guy possible. He's one of the worst. By some measure, you could say he was the worst Davidic king, but he wasn't because he repented, but he was a horrible man. But he repented. What's the message? How did this make in Tanakh? What Tanakh is a Barbara Tuchman, Chas v'Chalila. The Tanakh is Paul Johnson. Means it's written by historians? No. Tanakh is not interested in history. It's not interested in being a history book. It does use history to convey a message, an eternal message. That is, God will forgive you. No matter how bad you think you are, Hashem will forgive you. The worst people were forgiven by God. And and you don't need Jesus. You don't need anyone dying for your sins. Chas v'Chalila. So the doctrine of Trinity it's not just alien. That's what people frequently say. The doctrine of the Trinity is opposed by the prophets of Israel as being the worst possible thing a person could do. It's the motherlode of all idolatry. And in fact, in the Aseret HaDibros, in what is called the Ten Commandments, this prohibition of an association, of a partnership, is foremost, even worse. It's conveyed before the prohibition of worshiping stones and graven images. That's the next commandment. But the first commandment has nothing to do with graven images. It has to do with not having an association. It's the first of the negative commandments, l'Rabbi shutfus. So, but do not misunderstand rabbinic literature that is conveying the different qualities of Hashem as we in our human minds perceive it. And you should know it's really all coming from the same place. It's very much like a person who's looking at the creation and may see water, fire, earth as diverse, very different. Air, so different. And the pagans thought that they were diverse. But now we with the sciences we know that it's really all the same stuff. It's all hydrogen and carbon. It's all the same stuff. There's one Bashefa, there was one creator, blessed be his holy name. And although, this is a very good thing for you to know, although until recently, people didn't understand that it's all the same. It's all carbon. They didn't know this. They didn't understand about elements. They didn't know any of this stuff. This is, relatively speaking, in modern times. So the ancients logically said, I mean, to their Kabbalah, they said this is all completely different. And they assigned different gods to all these powers. Pharaoh was blown away by the seventh plague of hail because it combined ice with fire. And Pharaoh said, oh, I see now. It's very clear to me now that I am wrong and your God is just. What conveyed that to Pharaoh, that blood and all the other plagues didn't, the previous 6 didn't? Because it combined two things that the pagan world thought were completely incompatible. This is a perfect model and metaphor for you to understand what Chazal is saying. Chazal is saying that although you may see air, you may see fire, you may see water as totally different and have completely different sources, you should know it really is all coming from the same thing. Do you understand? And now we know, with our understanding of science, now we know it is the same stuff. So that's what Chazal is saying. Chazal is not saying that trinities. They're saying all these different manifestations of Hashem that you see is really all carbon. That's all they're saying, is it's all from the same HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Sometimes we don't understand. It's not ideal to have simple faith, but sometimes we need it. Emuna pshuta, which means simple faith. Sometimes we're confronted with a problem, with something we see that bothers us. How could God? We don't know. So a person who's loyal to God says, I don't understand what's happening now, but I trust that in the big picture, it's all from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's all from the same. But to end this off, because the doctrine of Trinity, of course, is nowhere found in the Torah. So Christians are left with a quandary. How do we possibly sustain such a vulgar doctrine? They're not saying vulgar. How do we sustain such a doctrine when there's no hint of this? So what they do is they have to go to rabbinic literature, to midrashim, go to the Zohar, texts that are written in a way that could be very elastic and could be misused. And they seize it, and they seek to sustain and to explain away how come there's smoking. And smoking is really healthy for you. And they completely, for most of them, have no clue what the original says. They have a look at what the original says. They just rely on pamphlets. Why do Christian missionaries go to all these rabbinic literature? Because there's nothing in Tanakh. So if it said in Tanakh there's one God in 3 persons, do you think they would go to a Medrash? Do you think they would go to Zohar? They never would. They would go right to the verse. It's not there, so they have to go to all these texts that are written in a way that could easily be misunderstood, and they exploit that in order to defend their vulgar beliefs. Anyways, thank you very much for that question in the land down under.
That was probably one of the greatest points so far. If it was in the text, they would not be going to the midrash or to the oral offer. They would actually go straight for the text, which means it's absolutely not there. That's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant.
Could you imagine if there was a verse in Leviticus somewhere that said there's one God in 3 persons, the Father, Son, let's say it said that. Okay,
Right.
What we want to do is I want to do a let's say with you because I need to get this point. If it said that, would missionaries go to a Zohar or Medrash Rabbah? Never in a million years. They would just go to the verse and say, there it is. The reason they go to these texts that are written in a way that's ambiguous, that requires scholarly understanding, that are written in a sort of an elastic way using parables, and therefore is vulnerable to misuse, is because there's nothing sustaining this in the text. They wouldn't go to rabbinic literature, which they claim they don't believe in, whenever they're drowning, and they seize it in order to defend the spiritual drug use. That's what it is. They want their drugs, and they'll do anything it takes. Just like a person who's never addicted to all kinds of substances, they'll use any kind of excuse to keep using their drugs. They want their drugs, and people could be manipulative. Now, again, I want to emphasize this. Most of these missionaries are good people. But they're so brainwashed and they become so dependent on it, it's very, very hard for them to think properly. And I'll say one other crazy thing. Do we have a moment? Or you have
no, go right ahead. We have colors, but that's okay. Go ahead and finish your point.
I need to say this point. You know, here in Eretz Yisrael, when I walk around the streets of Jerusalem, I meet many, many people, just really wonderful people. But I do meet a lot of many missionaries, and they see me and they come over to me and we sit down and talk. I won't say the name because I promised them I won't, but I met these two missionaries on Rehov Yafo, on Jaffa Street in Yerushalayim. And we had there was like a line of people speaking to me, one after another, and I saw these two missionaries. I knew they were missionaries because the way they were dressed. I promised them I won't say who they are. I'm not going to. And we had a lively and a very wonderful conversation. And at the end, one of the fellows asked me the question. It's astonishing. He asked me the question, Rabbi, if you knew that Jesus is the Messiah, would you accept it? And I was shocked. I just stared at him. I couldn't believe the question. He asked me if I did come to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, would I follow? And I go, like, are you insane? Of course I would. But what's going on in their head is they think that the Jews would deny him even if we believed in it. Because this is a very interesting point. That means if they're based on their claim is that rabbinic literature conveys the doctrine of the Trinity. Yeah. So the question is, why didn't these rabbis become Christians? Why didn't they believe in the doctrine of the Trinity? All these rabbis would have given their lives, and many did, not to become Christians. In their head, literally, a Jew could be somebody who knows the truth and deny it anyway. In Isaiah 53, this is. In order to do, who would do that? Only the devil would do that. Now, these are good people. They're so brainwashed that they actually could believe about the Jews, which I don't think anyone could believe about another people. What person in the world, if he knew the truth, would deny it? Only the Jew, because the Jew is portrayed and characterized in the Christian Bible as people who know the truth and deny it anyway. So using rabbinic literature, there's these layers. It's a vile, vulgar argument, because if we keep peeling away this argument, what is being conveyed is the rabbis really believed in the Trinity and believed in Christianity. So why not become Christians? Because they're devils. Because only the devil in Christian theology knows the truth but denies it anyway because of his own arrogance and so on. The Jews are the seed of the devil, John 8:44. The Jew is the Antichrist. And even when you have these Christians who love Israel, love the Jews, and some of these guys really do, the smoke is everywhere, the stench is everywhere, and they can't divorce. They can love the Jews, but think that the Jew is capable of acting in a way that almost no other nation could. Who would believe that on any nation, any person would know the truth and deny it? Why would you deny it? If it's said somewhere in Bamidbar, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, so that anyone who believed in him would not perish but have everlasting life. Anything like that, we would all be in church now. What are we, idiots? So you have to understand how filthy, how dirty these layers are. And the only reason this doesn't come across is because these missionaries have all the deodorant that they use in the bathrooms and the toilets to spray that creates an artificial scent of love and affection and respect. And it's all that is the deodorizers they spritz in the stinkiest places in order to mask the filthy, the vile smell. And that's what it is. Again, Christians, don't be offended. I'm just talking love, heart to heart. This is utter stupidity that Judaism would believe in doctrine of Trinity any more than the AMA would believe that smoking is beneficial and jogging causes weight gain. It's all silliness and stupidity. Anyways, thank you very much for that question.
That makes sense. Okay, and just to clarify for callers, two things. I see comments on, and this is going to be on a regular basis, not when we just have issues with the phone line. But when you see color on, like what's above your screen right now, at the top left of your screen, that means we already have a color engaged. If you call in while that is illustrated on your screen, you're probably not going to be able to get through. It may shoot you straight to voicemail. Sometimes it'll let me add on to a call log. Like right now, someone else is calling in. That's going to go to voicemail because I've already had somebody else on hold. That's one thing. And the second thing is, until I get the audio worked, I'm going to explain it. I tried to type it out, but it didn't really look good on the YouTube chat to understand it. So basically, you're going to call in. We can hear you just fine. The people watching the show can hear you just fine. You just won't be able to hear us. So you won't hear me when I say, welcome to the show. But 20 seconds later, you'll hear it on your TV monitor. That's my point. So when you guys call in, as soon as you keep watching your screen, and as soon as you hear it on your screen, just instantly start asking the question. And if I'm in the middle of talking, I'll just be quiet so we can hear the question, and then we'll pass it off to Rabbi Singer, okay? It'll be a pretty smooth operation if we do it that way, and I'll have it worked out by next week for sure. So, okay, so right now, we do have a caller. Caller, welcome to the show. Please tell us your name and where you're calling from. And this will take possibly, like I said, 15 seconds. It'd be nice to time it to see how long it takes. So they're still on. They've been on hold for a little bit, so we'll see what happens. Wow. It's good to have alternatives and options at least. So they should be getting it right about now. Roughly.
This is a little awkward.
It is.
I'm just kidding.
It actually is for me. I'm not used to this. This is weird.
I am. This is my field.
That's why you are here, right? Okay, so... All right, we're still waiting for the caller, and if that doesn't work, I'm going to hang up and let another call come through. I think they may have stepped aside. So let's take this call and see what happens. Okay, answer. Oh. That was loud. All right, caller, welcome to the show. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from. 20, 19, 18.
Hi, this is Maria.
Hey.
I don't know if you can hear me, but the question would be about God and his actually feelings. Does he have any feelings? I know he doesn't have any body or anything like that, but how do we actually, like if you wanted to please him, or how do we actually connect with him without having Torah, for example, like other people? They probably know God in other ways, not from a Hebrew perspective, from Jewish perspective. So how do we actually connect with the Creator? Or how do we pray to him, like, Jesus was teaching to pray, our Father who art in heaven, or whatever. So how do we connect with him? Okay, thank you.
Okay, very good question. Very good. All right, Rabbi, take it away.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I'm very, very grateful that you asked it. I want to convey to you how this works. Christianity is man's effort to create God in his image. If you were going to invent a God, you'd want Jesus with beautiful long hair and blue eyes. And Judaism is God's successful effort, of course, in creating man in his image. This is where I'm going with this. Because we are created b'tselem Elokim, in the image of Hashem, every person, doesn't make a difference. Every person is created b'tselem Elokim, in the image of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What that means exactly is not important. What is important is that our feelings are a reflection of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. However, of course, we can misuse those feelings. We feel rage at certain things, injustice, and so on, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu does. And lying inside of us is a neshama, not just is a soul, but it's not an animal soul. It's a soul that no creature has besides Adam. And it's a divine spark inside every person. And therefore, we can sense these feelings because we're creating the image of Hashem. We reflect it. Can these things be misused? Of course they can. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created water to give thirst to those who are... Well, a person could misuse water and fire to cook and heat, but a person could destroy with these things. It has to be the perfect balance. So, so the first part is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I don't want to say has emotions, but the sense of anger, it means justifiable anger and rage and so on, are reflections of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and no other creature in the world has these things. Only we reflect them. Now, the question is, how do we pray to God? One of the most ecstatic prayers in Tanakh was expressed by Hannah, I think the Goyim call her, is Hannah's prayer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the Almighty, for a child. And the Navi tells us in 1 Samuel chapter 2, Vatispalel Chana, the Chana, the translations I'm sure are something like that, that Chana prayed to God. This prayer conveys to us how to pray and how our prayers are structured properly. That's why her prayer is so prominent in the Navi, to teach us how to pray. She's not the only one who prayed, but her pattern is the same pattern of the Devium of the prophets, how to pray. Now, she begins in verse 2. It's really very beautiful. She was without children. Hannah was misunderstood by everyone. She was misunderstood by her husband. Husband asked her, "What do you need children? You have me." She looked at him like they were not the same. She was misunderstood by Eli, the high priest. Have you ever been misunderstood in your life where people don't get you? And Chana ultimately turns to Hashem. So she begins her prayer in the approaching the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Melech Malchei Amlachim, the King, the Creator of the heavens and the earth. And she starts in the addressing HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the third person. And she proclaims, Ein Kadosh K'Hashem. There is no one holy like Hashem. There's nothing holy like Almighty. This passage has 3 sections. Bear this in mind, because all our tefillos are based on this structure. Number 1, when you're standing for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, proclaim, there is nothing holy like Hashem. Remember, she's now speaking of God in the third person. When you stand before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the first thing when we say the Shemona Esrei, we pray is Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, the blessed are our Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Third person. She then goes, Ki ein biltecha, because there is nothing like you. What did she do then? She moved from the third person to the first person. There's no one besides you. Ve'ein sur ke'Elokeinu, and there is no rock like our God. So what she did was she moved successfully entreating to Hashem. She first started by saying, there's no one holy like HaKadosh Baruch Hu, nothing. And then it's like she just turned into that intimate stance with Hashem, and she said the words, Ki ein biltecha, because there is nothing like you. Nothing. There's no power like you. And this is how a person should pray. This is why we do pray from a book, a holy book, a siddur, that records the structure to teach us how to talk to Hashem, how to plug into God, how to communicate with Hashem. It's very frequently that you find lahavdil elef alfi avdalos, to separate 1,000 separations in the Christian Bible, that it's this impersonal way. You know, the Lord's Prayer is impersonal, because God is too holy to approach in the Christian model, even in a primitive Christian model. In fact, God thinks you're so disgusting that you need mediators and intercessors, which is the cornerstone of Paul's defilement, that there's one God and one mediator. Hannah's prayer would have been impossible. God looks upon every person as a sinner. He can't even look at you. Christians, not frequently. This is the core message of the Christian religion. I'm sorry to raise it because the caller spoke of the Lord's Prayer, but what we find in Judaism, in the proper approach to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is to proclaim HaKadosh Baruch Hu as there's nothing holy like Hashem, and then move in to have that personal, intimate connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then to declare V'ein tzur kelikenu, and there is no rock like our God. That's how a person should pray. And that's the structure of our tefillot. The word tefillah, it means, it's usually translated as pray, but the word tefillah really, the word pilel merely means to think. Lehispalel means to cause yourself to think. It's a reflexive word. So really what these tefillahs do, it's not like God's going, did you say the right formula? I'm not sure, because if you don't say it right, you're there. But rather what these prayers do, and the prophets use these prayers exquisitely, is they teach us how to think and how to encounter Hashem and how to connect to God. And if you pray like Hannah prayed, if you pray the way Daniel prayed, if you pray the way Chizkiyahu HaMelech prayed, then you're going to be able to encounter HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Begin by recognizing Dalef Neimi Ato Amrid. Know before whom you're standing. Then you can step in to the realm and speak to HaKadosh Baruch Hu directly. The prayers are structured this way. It's important to think about them, to meditate on them, and you then will be lifted up into a new creation and to be able to have what's called devekus with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Devekus means to have a sublime connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In fact, there's a mitzvah d'oraisa. It's a mitzvah min HaTorah. It's one of 613 mitzvahs, not just to believe in God. It's a mitzvah d'oraisa, of course. It's mitzvah to believe only in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's to love HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a mitzvah min HaTorah. It's a commit to love HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's a special mitzvah in the Torah to have devekus with Hashem, to have a sublime connection with Hashem. This is not possible without the Torah and the prophets. Not possible at all. And what we're doing is when our mind, the word lave is translated as heart, but it's really that's what it means. It doesn't mean the pump. It means the mind. When you irrigate the mind with the words of the Nevi'im of blessed memory, your mind then becomes oriented to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu properly. Lahavdil, it's like someone who wants to connect to the internet, but you need to know the password. You have to be connected. And without it, you could all day look at the most expensive computer, the biggest brain in the world, the smartest guy from Oxford to teach you about genes, and all. You can't connect. You have to know how to connect. You have to irrigate your mind with the words of the prophets. You have to submit and surrender yourself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu completely. How? Not in your own mind, according to your own heart, it will lead you astray. Rather, surrender your heart, meaning your mind, to the words of Moshe Rabbeinu alav hashalom, to the words of the prophets, a blessed memory, and then your mind will become oriented properly to receive the connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and fulfill the mitzvah of Devekus, which means to cling to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not possible without Tanakh. Not possible at all. You try all you want. You're hitting your head against the wall. You'll do what these priests do. It's sit and, I don't know, they take vows of silence and celibacy, sit on mountaintops, all kinds of terrible things they do. And all these religions, people walking around in pajamas all day, they don't know what to do with themselves. They have no Torah. I'm not going to, when I was living in the Far East, of course I saw Buddhist priests all over the place, Hindu priests all over the place. Nebuch, they want to connect to God, but they don't have a Torah, and they don't have no idea how to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They want, you could see their effort to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You see these priests walking around with saffron robes and pajamas and wearing sandals and all kinds of things, shaving their heads, the celibacy, all kinds of things, and they have no Torah, and that's the bottom line. People who really are very spiritual people, no question. Spiritual means that they want to connect to God, but they have adopted the dualistic understandings of the pagan world, that God and the physical realm are not compatible, and without Torah, they're not there. It's very important to plug into Tanakh and let the words of the prophets fill your mind, filled with Torah. And if hafachba v'hafachba kikulaba, search Tanakh, everything's there. It's all there. Turn it over, turn it again, you will find it. And just say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I want you in my life. I want to know how. Right? So that's the way to do it. Only through the Holy Torah Kedosha. And learn Lashon Kodesh. It's such an easy language, but if you're just going to learn like you're studying some math or a cookbook, you have to use it. You have to be part of a Jewish community and use Lashon HaKodesh. That should be on your lips, because that's the language of Hashem, and that's the language by which the world was created. Anyways, thank you very much for your thoughtful question.
Very good. Okay, so we'll take this next caller. Caller, welcome to the show. Please tell us your name and where you're calling from. By the way, Rabbi, look for an email from Larry Beck. He's a devout watcher, and he just had a birthday. He's in Israel, and he would like to hook up with you. Really great guy. We had an interview with him on the show. I can hear them watching. Let's give him a second. Maybe they didn't catch the see that part. Well. Okay, well, let's try this one to see. Sometimes answering a call will actually do it. Hello, welcome to the show. Tell us your name, where you calling from.
Sometimes answering a call will actually do it. Hello, welcome to the show. Tell us your name, where you calling from.
Apparently that's not getting through either.
No, that person doesn't realize it's him or her.
Hi, my name is Carla. I'm calling from Georgia.
Apparently that's not getting through either.
No, that person doesn't realize it's him or her.
Oh, she's waiting for our response. We hear you. Go ahead and answer. Go ahead and thank you.
I was calling to ask, the rabbi just mentioned.
She's waiting for our response. We hear you.
I've been listening online, and the rabbi just spoke about prayer, and I'm sorry if I can mispronounce it, a Siddur, the prayer book. I am not Jewish, unfortunately, but a Noahide. Is there a prayer book that we might use? Thank you.
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know this, that the word Noahide is misunderstood, and Noahide is a person created in the image of Hashem who Judaism is her faith. That's all it is. Okay? The person has not joined the nation of Israel. That person has embraced the faith of Klal Yisrael. We're seeing this enormous movement of probably millions of people worldwide who are doing this, who are embracing the Jewish faith, but to their knowledge, they're not Jewish. There may be, but it really is best to have a Jewish prayer book. After all, if the prophets conveyed to us that in a perfect time, the nations of the world are going to approach the Jews and ask them, teach us about God, for we've heard God is with you. So the best way to learn about HaKadosh Baruch Hu is to use the Jewish prayer books and to see the structure of the prayers. Art Scroll is the largest Jewish publisher in the world, and they did a brilliant job of producing an iconic prayer book, their Art Scroll Siddur, which has an extensive amount of explanation and commentary, because as it turns out, the prophets express something, but if you're not familiar with how it all fits together, a person may not understand it properly. And that's why dentists who ostensibly are working just on the teeth, on the gums, on the mouth, whatever it is, they have to take pre-med. They have to understand organic chemistry. They have to understand how it all fits together. So what you should surely do is get a Jewish prayer book. If the Messianic age marks a time where everyone is living to their greatest potential in a pure state, and in that time it is the nations of the world who turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who turn to the Holy One, and then worship God the way the Jews do, then surely today, a person who fears Hashem should look to the Jewish prayer book to see how to pray to Hashem, to learn the words of Chazal, who simply put it all together for us, and that's what you should use. I'll say this. I don't know if I ever said this. It's something so strong that, and I could be I never discussed it. There's no doubt that ex-Christians who have quit smoking, their clothing still smells from the tobacco. There's no question. And in the Christian Bible, it is conveyed that non-Jews are dogs, they're lower level, they're Gentiles, that's how it's in the Gospels, and that's Jews wouldn't eat with a non-Jew, wouldn't converse. Is all not true. It's misunderstood. And when former Christians who have jettisoned the doctrine of the church, sometimes this view is there. The reason why Klal Yisrael, the Bnei Yisrael, is here is to be a Mamleches Kahanim, a kingdom of priests. That means it's very important for you to look to the children of Israel who are loyal to Hashem, to see how they pray, and you should adopt that. And you should cling to Jews who are loyal to Hashem and learn how to pray to Hashem. I don't know if there's Nochai prayer books today. I don't know. It's best to have a Jewish prayer book and see how the Jewish people will pray to Hashem, to learn from the Bnei Israel how to talk to Hashem. And when I say Jewish people, I'm not talking about Sam Harris, and I'm not talking about Noam Chomsky. I'm talking about those Jews who are loyal to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm not talking about the people who are of Jewish extraction, but are in rebellion against Hashem, and there are plenty of Jews like that. In fact, the leading forces, those are anti-Jew, or those are against Hashem, very often are people who are technically of Jewish extraction, of Jewish ancestry, but they are the enemies of God. So I'm talking about people who are the true servants of Hashem. So thank you very much for that question.
Okay, very good, very good. All right, we'll see if the next caller can catch us. Caller, welcome to the show. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from. This time I'm going to be quiet until see if they respond. Okay, that was more than enough time for passing.
If you're on hold, we're waiting for you, so you know that. Because I know the person who's calling just hears silence and doesn't know, really, I'm speaking. It really is you. You just go with your question.
Okay.
because of this electronic problem that you're hearing us through the internet rather than directly. And this will certainly be repaired by next week.
We've got
in
a
future shows.
Okay, so we've got a caller on. Let's see if they're going to say anything here. Nope. Well, I don't really know how to illustrate it.
Hello?
Can you hear me? Hello, hello? Hello, hello? I'm trying a few more buttons here, too, so I really have no clue what happened. I'll have to pull this thing apart this week and see what's going on. Okay, let's try this one. Let's see if they're going to answer. Caller, you're live?
Caller, you're live.
Hello?
Yes, can you hear us?
Hello?
Go ahead with
Hello?
the person calling in doesn't realize that we hear
Hello?
us, but
Right.
Yes, I can.
Okay, go ahead
Yes,
and ask.
I can.
Go ahead and ask your question. You can hear us now, or
Hello?
no? Can you hear us now?
Okay, so if you can hear me, Will, this is Steve from Brooklyn. Quick question for the rabbi. Progressive revelation, we've already discussed it, how silly it is. It doesn't make any sense. However, I just want to understand what was revealed at Sinai. Was there a massive national download? Was it conceptual, and then certain things were revealed later in the 40 years? How did that work? I hope I've said it clearly. Okay, thanks.
Okay, very good. Handed off nicely. And I'll illustrate this one more time. We still have quite a bit of time, at least a half an hour left on the show. So when you call in, just don't ask your question right away. Just wait for us to ask you. Just keep watching your monitor. And as soon as you hear me introduce you, I'll be quiet. And then as soon as you hear it, go ahead and present your question. But you won't be able to hear me talking back to you on the phone. You'll only be able to hear us through the YouTube video. Okay, so Rabbi, have you got the question for you lined up?
yes.
Very good. Okay, pass it away.
The event at Mount Sinai was so that the children of Israel would know that what they are hearing is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, from God. It was an unprecedented event in human history, never to repeat it again. Never before has a nation heard the voice of God and lived, and will never happen again. How do I know? Because the Torah openly says this in Deuteronomy chapter 4. We are told, the Torah challenges you, has there any nation, ask yourself, are there any nation, from one end of the world to the other end, has there ever been a nation that heard the voice of God and lived? The point of these 10 iterations is that the Bnei Yisrael would know that Moshe Rabbeinu was a true Navi, and what was being conveyed to them was directly from God. And in fact, we are told at the end of Exodus chapter 20 that the Bnei Yisrael, when they heard the voice of Hashem, they were not prophets. They would literally drop dead from the experience. If you're not suited for that experience, it would kill you. And in fact, they begged Moshe, we know now that God is speaking through you. We know you are truly, you could do the rest. We'll listen to it. The point of the national revelation is to know that this is an event that you are the witness people to the world. What are we bearing witness to? We were actually there at Mount Sinai. So now, within the Aseres HaDibros, what is conventionally rendered as the 10 Commandments, and I'll use that because it's conventional, I don't want to confuse anyone, it incorporates all 630 commandments are there, and Moshe would elucidate this and unpack this for the children of Israel. It is true that when Moshe Rabbeinu conveyed this, the Bnei Israel had many, many questions. There was a long line of people, of the children of Israel, who stood waiting with their questions for Moshe Rabbeinu, a long line around the block. And in fact, it was Moses' father-in-law, Yisro, who observed the spectacle and encouraged Moshe to charge great men with the knowledge and the hidden things, Scripture tells us, and they would then field these questions because, in fact, you have to break down the Torah into all the oral information, and they had to, and only the most difficult questions were brought to Moshe Rabbeinu. And we are told explicitly that God spoke to you from the fire, Kol Devarim Atem Shoimim, the voice of the words you heard, Usmuna Einichem Royim, Kol. You saw no image, only a voice. So what is very important is that the event at Mount Sinai was to convey the essence of all our beliefs, and these commandments contain all of the 613 mitzvahs, which were immediately conveyed to the Bnei Israel. The Torah, however, as we have it now, they certainly did not have. That it was at the end of Moses' life that he wrote Sifrei Torah and gave it out to all the tribes, and another Sefer Torah was put in the Ark of the Covenant, because after all, the Torah contains it all the history and including the events that occurred in the wilderness, and the Bnei Israel had no access to that. So they knew about the mitzvahs, they didn't know about the history. And it was only when Moshe Rabbeinu, before his death, then he recorded the Torah, with the exception of the last 8 passages of the book of Deuteronomy. Those last 8 passages written by Yehoshua ben Nun, which was Joshua, who was given the smicha, the ordination of Moses, the hod, which is the splendor that rested on Moshe Rabbeinu, was conveyed to Yeshua. The children of Israel followed Yeshua the way they followed Moses. See the opening chapter of Joshua. See Joshua 4:14. B'chula b'chula. So the Torah as we have it, they were only given at the very end of their trek in the wilderness, prior to crossing over the Jordan, facing Jericho. So thank you for your question.
Okay, and very good. And I think I may have just fixed it. So I won't tell you what was wrong with it yet. Caller, please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
Good morning, William.
Can you
Ray?
You can hear me? I'm guessing.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Very good. Go ahead with your question.
Yeah. We've talked in the past, William. And
very good.
Good day, Rabbi. Here's my question. In the Messianic age, according to the Tanakh, we are going to be having sacrifices. Why are we going to be having sacrifices?
What's the purpose
are they going to be sin sacrifices?
Cool.
Great question.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your call, Ray. Feel free to call again, okay?
Yep.
Thank you, brother. Take care.
I will. And have a good one. Shalom.
Okay. Shalom. Bye-bye. So just for all the callers' sake, we are back online. I rerouted all my wires to clean up last week, and there was a wire left unplugged. Yay, we figured it out. Okay, there you go. Rabbi, it's all yours.
Okay. So as it turns out, there are many reasons why we bring offerings. People who are raised in the church, Rahman al-Islam, think, and I know this, that sacrifices were just brought for sins. And this is such a huge mistake. And that's why reasonable, smart, intelligent, thoughtful people could believe in Christianity, because they think that all the Jews were doing were bringing sacrifices for their sins, and that means God needs blood, and therefore that's you need Jesus. And that's why you find very nice people are Christians. They don't think they're at war with God. They think what they believe is a proper manifestation of the biblical religion. It's not at all the case. So we are told in many places in Tanakh that when Mashiach comes, it doesn't use this term. I'm paraphrasing, because even the word Mashiach in Tanakh is not used about the Messiah. But we're going to use conventional language. That in the Messianic age, the the sacrificial system will be returned to its full order. Most of the sacrifices that you find in Tanakh had nothing to do with sin, but were brought because it was a certain time of the year, the week, the holiday, for certain auspicious occasions, and an offering wasn't some weird, as they call it, cult of sacrifices. It was taking the physical and raising it up to spiritual, and that's what we're all doing in the Jewish faith. We are taking the physical, we're taking a piece of food, and we're not so fast, put it in your mouth, make a bracha, and connect that physical to the spiritual. Raise yourself up. Raise the physical to the spiritual realm. Those who are successful followers of HaKadosh Baruch Hu know how to take those things that are physical and raise it up to the spiritual. That's also a person brought an offering, and it was a reach nichach, the smoke that went up, connected heaven and earth, like the dream, the ecstatic dream that Jacob had, one of the greatest dreams throughout the Holy Scriptures. Now, there is a sacrifice for sin, for sins that are committed unintentionally, that are committed b'shogeg. B'shogeg means unintentional, but doesn't mean by accident, as it's normally translated. B'shogeg, and this is why without Hebrew you're in such trouble. B'shogeg means unintentional, means a person didn't intend to rebel against God, but a person was careless, made a mistake, and could have been more careful. It does not mean if a person is walking on Shabbos and happens to, his foot kicks a tomato, which he didn't even see the tomato growing on a tree, and the tomato comes off the plant. So, right? Well, you're not allowed to pick fruits on Shabbos, but that person had no intention of kicking a tomato, didn't know he was walking through a tomato plant. That's not b'shogeg, that's an onus, that's just an accident. But people make mistakes, and they could have been more careful. And that's what the carbon, this offering is for, Leviticus chapter 4. For people who make mistakes, could have been more careful. As it turns out, this offering is going to be restored in the Messianic age, and we are told that the Mashiach himself is going to bring a carbon chatas, an offering for sin, and we're told explicitly in Ezekiel chapter 45, see verse 20, 21, 22, explicitly that the prince himself is going to bring a sin offering on behalf of himself and Klal Yisrael. This is inconceivable in the Christian religion, that should ever be a return of the animal sacrificial system. Paul, the big nevela of the Jewish people, insists that won't happen in Romans chapter 6. And his student, whoever authored Hebrews, in chapter 10, verse 18, conveys the same thing, and they are so off because they were inventing a religion on their own. The Navi tells us that the reason for this offering is for sins that are committed without thought. The word chatos literally means to miss the mark. We're told in the Bible that they were archers who were so good they never missed, and it's the same word in the text. So now, why, you'll ask the question, if in the Messianic age the world is in a perfect state, and there will no longer be rebellion against Hashem, which is the hallmark of what is the Messianic age, the knowledge of Hashem will cover the world as the water covers the sea, Isaiah chapter 11, verse 9. All the nations will speak in a pure speech, Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 9. Rebellion against HaKadosh Baruch Hu will come to an end. Those who rebel against Hashem and don't repent will be destroyed. And all that will be left are those who will turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Hashem will be king of the whole world. He will be one, his name will be one. And Zechariah 14. So then in such a world where all the nations will recognize the one true God, this is the hallmark of the man. Why would there be a sin offering? I thought sin would come to an end. It's not the case at all. Only intentional sins would come to an end. There won't be anyone murdering, there won't be any idolatry, but people sometimes can be careless. It could be, for example, that somebody has to be careful where they're walking. They're not working in the cemetery. They weren't careful enough, and they walked into the Beis Hamikdash in the temple, and they brought an offering in a state of impurity because they could have been more careful where they were walking. I just said, like in our time today, there are places in Tzfat. Tzfat is a very holy city in Eretz Yisrael. It's somewhat in the north. It is elevation, the highest city in Eretz Yisrael. It's one of the 4 very, very special holy cities in Israel. So Tzfat is a place also that there are a lot of earthquakes, devastating. And there's a great cemetery there, which nobody even knows how, it could be 500,000 people buried there. But the earth shifted considerably there, and as a result, places that people thought Kohanim, priests, could walk, because a priest can't come into contact with a dead body, cannot walk through a cemetery. It was discovered that there are bones all over the place. And some Kohanim go to Tzfat and they're not careful where they walk. And they go to places like the mikveh of the Ari and so on, and they can't walk there. Now we know for sure, but some people are just not careful. So it's not that they mean to rebel, they're just not being responsible, or they just not careful enough. So because in the Messianic age, we're not going to be automatrons, we're not going to be robots, it's just going to be obvious what the truth is. Very much the same as on your stove that you use for cooking. When you see a fire on your stove, do you have free will to stick your hand on the fire? The answer is you do have free will. Would you do it? You would never do it. Why? Because it's so clear what the consequences would be to stick your hand in the fire that you just never do it. It's not that you don't have free will to stick your hand. You can do it. You could, but you would be a Michiganer. You'd be altogether insane to do that because the consequences are so clear. That's what the Messianic age will be like. It'll be just everything will be manifestly clear that who Hashem is and what he wants. And all false teachings and false ideas will be rejected by those who are loyal to Hashem. However, said that you would never take a knife and cut your hand open if your person is not mentally ill. You would never stick your hand in the fire. But how many times were you cooking in the kitchen and you weren't careful and you burnt your hands? I'll bet you if you spend any time in the kitchen, you couldn't count the number of times that you inadvertently touched the pot or put your hand on the fire or grabbed something that was burning hot and you caused yourself a grave injury. How many times were you slicing onions and tomatoes and you cut your fingers open because you were slicing it like an idiot without paying attention? Okay? How many times? You couldn't count the number of times that you cut your fingers with knives and all kinds of utensils. Does that mean you just want to cut yourself? No. It means you weren't careful enough. You had no intention at all but could you have been more careful? Absolutely. Could you have taken the precautions in a kitchen where there are wonderful things going on, but a lot of things that can harm you? If you had been more attentive to what you're doing and you weren't chaloming, dreaming about who knows what, as you're cutting an onion, as you're using a frying pan, you would not have injured yourself. That's what the Messianic age will be like. People will commit sins unintentionally, but they're not careful enough. Because it is a time when rebellion ends, but we don't become something else. It becomes obvious that a fire will burn you. It becomes obvious that the doctrine of Trinity will burn you. It's very obvious that violating Shabbos and eating tarfus and eating all kinds of chazer, all pig and all these things is horrible for you. It's cancer. It's just be obvious that smoking will kill you. It's very obvious that using heroin will kill you. And it'll be, now, will people make mistakes? Yes. And that's the role of karbonos in the Messianic age. And we see it, in fact, in Ezekiel. I should bracket in the last, let's say from 41 to 47. It's not the last 8 chapters, but there's one more chapter, 48. But really from 41 to 47, we are told about the temple and its environs and so on, and we have many descriptions of what will go on in the temple. And in Ezekiel 43 and 44, we are told about the korban chatas, the sin offering, to cleanse the altar, to cleanse the temple. Why would an altar need cleansing? Because people have violated it by being in an impure state and bring korbanos, and had to be cleansed. So in the Messianic age, there will be sin offerings, but that's only for unintentional sins. The church must answer the question, why would the Messiah have to bring a sin offering? After all, he is the sin offering according to the Christian religion. Why would he have to? And according to them, the Messiah could never have made a mistake. He is God. So therefore, they don't know what to do. And it's not a pleasant thing, but if you look at the Christian commentators on this, they don't know what to do. They have no clue how to solve this problem. They're all over the place, explaining why they're offerings, why they're sin offerings. They talk about things like there's a retroactive memorial. It's nonsense. There's no memorials. It tells us explicitly why these offerings will be there. On holidays, the people are going to eat from the Korban Pesach, the Passover lamb. These offerings are not going to change. There are unique offerings we find in Ezekiel, but these are offerings that are brought because this is a sudden moment. Mashiach comes, and there's special offerings for that as well that are marking the moment. So there's the answer to your question. But most sacrifices had absolutely nothing to do with sins. In fact, the Passover offering, for example, which is in Ezekiel 45, was brought because you were righteous, because you were loyal to God. You didn't fear the Egyptian army, you feared God. And that's why you brought the lamb as an offering, even though killing a lamb would have been a capital offense by the standards of the Egyptians. You didn't care. You feared Hashem. So thank you very much for that thoughtful question.
Very, very cool. Okay, so Rabbi, we have time for one more question, and so we'll take this next caller. I believe we've got him on the line now. Shoal, welcome to the show. What's the question for Rabbi?
First of all, mazel tov to Rabbi making his aliyah.
Cool.
Actually, turns out we have a mutual friend apparently that you met on the float for the Olim in New York. Maybe I'll tell you more about that later. But my question is, it's actually sort of a twofold question. I guess whatever you have time to answer, you could answer. I understand that I think you may have mentioned before, but the person Ron Wyatt and his claims that he found the Ark of the Covenant, and supposedly it was hidden from Yirmiyahu Navi, from Jeremiah the prophet, and there's a claim. I haven't seen anything really substantiated other than the claims that he makes. And one of the claims that he made is that he had like the blood tested. He claimed that there was blood from the sacrifice from the crucifixion that went down and covered the ark, and he claimed he had this blood tested, and that this blood contained only DNA from the mother. I've also heard this, that this is also with the Shroud of Turin, that also this blood contains only DNA from the mother. It's my understanding that it's is like a type of some sort of like a rarity, but it's not entirely an impossibility. So the question is really, does the evidence match that he found that possibly found the ark, and also that for this rare type, for this blood rarity, does it exist?
Okay, thank you for your question.
Okay, thanks for calling in, Shulman. Thank you.
Thanks.
Let me state what I don't know. I don't know a lot about Ron Wyatt. I heard that name kicked around, and from the Christians who have spoken about him, I don't know him and haven't studied his stuff, but he is not just regarded with suspicion, he's held in derision because of, I am told, nonsense that he teaches, that he has with the Ark of the Covenant, with this stuff, with the crossing of the children of Israel over the Red Sea. Now, I confess that I never studied him, and I have no reason to study any of the things he says. You could be sure that this whole thing with blood is nonsense. I didn't study it, but you can be sure that everybody was very curious about such a thing. I can't even imagine how this could be done. So I plead that I really haven't studied his work. From every person I've spoken to, it's not that it's just controversial, but I've been told that he's out the window. You can be certain that if they found such blood that it had one thing, it would be all over the place. It's not all over the place because it's the nature of his work, I am told. Now, I want to just say this. I did not study his stuff. I'm not really familiar with it. And this is just what people have told me. You could research it more, but I'm just not familiar with the Ron. I don't even know if he's alive or not. But I am told that the Ark of the Covenant certainly we don't have, was hidden by Yirmiyahu, and if he had, he would have pictures. But I don't want to talk about what I don't know, and I really don't know about his stuff. I can only tell you about the reputation. So I'm afraid I'm not familiar with it at all.
Okay. All right. Well, that technically wraps it up. Kind of wish we had a few more hours to go. We had a little bit of downtime on the phone situation, so thank goodness we've got all that worked out. So, so Rabbi, so at some point when you get some free time, I know you're a busy hombre, check your email. I'm going to say this again because I said it in between. I was trying to explain the calling issues. Larry Beck he's a really, really great guy. He's come to the studio. He lives in reach of drive from here. But anyway, I believe he's in Israel right now. They're visiting. And we did a wonderful testimony of this guy. He's ex preacher for many, many years, and his testimony was absolutely just amazing. But anyway, he's there in Israel now. Super sweet guy. He'd love to meet you. So if you can work it out, at least get his email at Larry
I
Beck.
certainly will get in touch with him. I have to just note this.
Yes.
That this country is full of ex-pastors. There's so many. Right. There's something I can't even walk to the drugstore. I can't go shopping for a tomato or a potato or a chicken without meeting an ex-pastor, an ex-priest who has embraced the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The people who are embracing the faith of Israel are not, from what I've encountered, are not former high church Episcopalians who are not religious people, who are liberal Christians today. They are former evangelicals, Bible thumpers, and they're repenting in masses that are stunning. On Shabbos, I was davening. I met so many former Christians who are now religious Jews, who are former pastors, and I want you to know this. There's so many converts here in Israel who are former pastors. So I want to tell you this, that former pastors make fabulous Jews. And Moody Bible Institute and Fuller Theological Seminary and Dallas Theological Seminary and Nyack Bible College and the Philadelphia College of Bible has produced so many Jews, so many great rabbis and Jews. It's amazing. And that's where they came from. They came from this evangelical Christians, and because now it is very in vogue in the evangelical world to learn about Eretz Yisrael, to learn about Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people, to learn about the Torah. I mean, anything Jewish today in the churches is a very big deal. You have pastors coming out with a tallis in their churches, wearing a Jewish prayer shawl. Anything Jewish is big in the church. And this, strangely, sparks a tremendous curiosity among Christians. And they begin to seek and learn more, and they begin to realize that although the Christians are using this Hebrew, but there's no substance to it, and they begin to have great doubts immediately, and then they study Torah, and then they realize it's all sheker v'chazaf, and they do tshuva, and they become b'nei Noach, they convert to Judaism, and they become leading figures here in Eretz Yisrael. So I want to take a moment to thank Moody Bible Institute, and I want to thank Fuller Theological Seminary and Dallas Theological. All they produce so many great Jews here in Eretz Yisrael. So great thank you to Moody for
teaching them so well,
producing so many converts to Judaism.
Right. Hey, you know what? I'm going to throw one more question at you that I just saw on YouTube because I already closed the phone lines a while back. So if you got just a few minutes at least, we got like 10 minutes left in the show, so might as well use it, right? You good
Absolutely.
with it? Okay, cool. Sure. Okay, so this is a YouTube question. C. Pross. I hope I said that right. Forgive me if I did not. What does it say in the Bible about the Messianic age and slavery?
All right. This is really a very, very good question. And I just need, no one's ever framed the, I've been asked about slavery in the Torah. That I've been asked in the past. So slavery is not mentioned at all in connection with the Messianic age. Now, people at first glance of slavery, that's something that bothered me about the Bible, because you have the Torah clearly advocates slavery. Now, I want to make this really simple. There's a Jewish slave, a non-Jewish slave. I need to get this point across. The word in English, a slave, is the same word that an eved is translated in Torah. And there are similarities between the concepts, but there could not be anything further apart than the sinful nature of slavery in the United States, in Alabama in 1840, and the slave in the eved in the Torah. The person who becomes an eved in Torah, I'm not talking about someone who stole and is an indentured servant, but a person who becomes an eved in the Torah means somebody who is joining a family and then is not a biologically connected to that family, but takes on the responsibilities of the family and bears the privileges of the family. And people became a part of the family, because if you didn't have a family, you were in huge trouble in the ancient world. It wasn't like today you can go and get a job in accounting and get your own apartment. In the ancient world, without a family, without a clan, without a tribe, you were done with. Now, in the Messianic age, those who are loyal to Hashem will bear the benefits of the great joy and the manifold blessings on the earth. So this will not be necessary for someone to become a slave. We do have language at the end of Isaiah, but it doesn't mean a slave, where the nations will want to serve Klal Yisrael, which means they'll want to enter into the family of Klal Yisrael, not as converts, but just to have a tremendous connection to the Bnei Yisrael. And we are told, in fact, that the sons of those who persecuted you will come bowing to you and want to be your servant. It doesn't mean they'll become slaves in any sense, in even the sense the Torah is saying. It means that they want to join Klal Yisrael and being a part of it. Let me give you just an example of where this is crystallized. Avram Avinu, Abraham, our father, he had an eved. His name was Eliezer. He was a very great man. He was a part of Avram Avinu's family. He wasn't biologically connected to Abraham, but he was an eved of Avram Avinu. And in fact, in Genesis 15, Abraham was an old man, and his wife was not young at all. And the Holy One promised Avram Avinu that from him would come forth a great nation. And Avram Avinu's thought was, I don't have children. You must mean Eliezer, because he is a Ben Basi. He is a son of my house. That's what an Eved meant. An Eved meant that this person now joined your house. And in fact, an Eved Kanani had all the mitzvahs, the commandments of a Jew, a female, meaning that he was obligated to keep the mitzvahs that are negative and the positive commandments that are not time-bound as a woman does. And in fact, when a person was freed as a servant, slave, that person became a Jew. There are instances in our literature where there wasn't a quorum, 10 people for a minyan, and a great rabbi would free his slave so that he would fill the minyan to have 10 people. So I want to convey that. So we do have this language. And be very careful that when you go from Lashon Kodesh and Eved, I mean, we're all servants of Hashem. We're joining in the family of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, recognizing who. So we have to be very careful. When we move from English to Hebrew, we think, there's slavery, and it's like, the slavery in the South in the 19th century and earlier in American history, slavery was everywhere as it was in Europe. It's not that slavery at all. In fact, and just to illustrate this point further, because I need you, the viewer, to be very clear about this. If you look at the literature on slavery in America, I'm an American, so that's the culture I'm familiar with. So much of the literature is about slaves that fled, that ran away from their masters. And in fact, some of America's greatest novels, one I'm thinking about in particular, perhaps, is about a runaway slave. So that's and what would happen to slaves if they were caught? Horrific. So much of American literature, not today, but from an earlier period, is about slaves and runaway slaves and so on, and places that slaves can run to, states that would harbor slaves who are runaway slaves. That's the American literature is pregnant with this narrative, and that's the most striking storyline that we find in the American literature regarding slavery. Not today. I'm talking about 19th century literature. Of course, I'm thinking of Mark Twain. Conversely, I want to contrast this point. If you look at the problem of the Eved in the Torah, the Eved is somebody who the fundamental problem is that the slave loves it and he wants to stay with his master. In this case, it's the Hebrew slave, and he gets in big trouble for it. The big problem in the Torah is that a Jewish Eved wanted to stay with his master, didn't want to go free, and in fact, he had to put a nail through his ear that he should have remembered that he's supposed to be slave to Hashem, and he's allowed to stay until the Jubilee. Now, of course, there are people, we have many idiots. I'm saying this, we all have our nut jobs who exploited this. Of course, abused their avodim, who should have been a part of the family and were abused. And there's provisions made for that in the Torah, that slaves go free and they're if they're abused by their family. But guess what? If you have one pillow in the house, your Eved gets it, not you. So the term Eved is used about the nations of the world in the Messianic age as wanting to be avodim, wanting to be the servants of Klal Yisrael. It doesn't mean the Jews are going to enslave the world. Chas v'chalila. It doesn't mean that at all. The problem is once you go into English, you're in such trouble. It means that the nations just want to connect to Klal Yisrael, and what can I do to help? And they're going to, in fact, bring their valuables. They bring their soul. They want to be part of the building. They want to be part of the final redemption and the Beis Hamikdash. They want to be a part of it, and that's what we see. So that's what's meant by Eved. Be very careful. Where it says the nation will be your servants, it doesn't mean we want to. It means they want to connect. We want to be as close to you as possible, and we see it today. I believe we're already living in that age, and today we see people who are not Jewish, and they're asking the question, "What can I do to be close to the Jewish people? What can I do to connect with the Klal Yisrael? What can I do to be an Eved of Klal?" They don't mean they want to clean the floors, the slave, none of that. They mean I just want to join in with this project. I want to be connected to it. I want to bless Israel in every way possible. And that's happening today, and it never happened in history. Never happened since the days of Shlomo Melech. Really. I mean, when in history did such a thing happen? And it's because I believe, I'm not sure, but I believe that we're living in a special time, and now people who should never want to have anything to do with the Jews. This is an insane time to want to connect to the children of Israel. Why? Because the Jews are a lightning rod. The world, spending all day cursing us. We just got finished with the worst crime in history. How long ago was it? 75 years ago? So we should be radioactive. People should just run away from us. But in fact, we see the world is connected to us. So be very careful with linguistics and language. Tanakh is using a different type of language. It means to be an Eved. Means something else, means joining in, connecting to be a part of the family in some way. Of course, the servant has responsibilities, has benefits that he ordinarily would not have because she is not biologically connected. I hope that answers your question well. Thank you.
Very cool, very cool, Rabbi. Thank you for taking that last question for sure. It's been a good, very fulfilling show for sure. Yeah, and all you viewers out there, be sure if you really enjoy what's going on here, click the like button, share it. The more likes that you have, or thumbs up, I think what it's called on YouTube, and this deals with anybody's channel, not just mine. The more likes it has, the more it will generate search results. So if you guys really want this information to be spread, be sure to share it and like it as much as possible. Even on Facebook, same thing. But really appreciate you, Rabbi. Thank you for your time and your dedication. And guys, don't forget about the books you can still get at Amazon.com. Let's Get Biblical Volumes 1 and 2. The audio files you can download, you can actually download them or listen to them at the website, which is, I keep wanting to quote your email address. Okay, actually go to toviasinger.tv as well. So, outreachjudaism.org. It's a really, really neat and very easy to find your way around. Just go to the top of the website, look across the page, and you'll see free audio titled. And on that free audio tab, you can click on it, and it'll actually have correlating titles that match your pages in your book with different information. So you don't want to miss out on that. But as for that goes, Rabbi, it has been a great, great show. Thank you so much, and we will see you next week, Hashem willing, and see all you folks next week as well. So I hope you guys have a great day, and Shavua Tov. Peace, Shalom Aleichem. Take care, everybody. Later.
חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה והכמיהה. אני אתה אתם תמיד כולם ביחד. חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד.